Max Johnson adjusted the strap of his acoustic guitar, more to buy time than because it needed adjusting. He was about to perform in front of an audience that included a species whose primary form of communication involved bioluminescent flashes and subsonic vibrations, and he wasn't sure if they even had ears. Commander Zixner of the Zorvian delegation sat at the center of the conference room, his tall, segmented frame reclined in what was probably the alien equivalent of casual interest. The Zorvians had arrived on Earth just 24 hours earlier, their visit part of a diplomatic initiative to foster intergalactic understanding. So far, they'd spent most of their time, politely but silently, observing everything from human architecture to cuisine. This cultural showcase, however, was supposed to be the highlight of their visit. Dr. Ellen Martinez leaned over and whispered, "Relax, Max. It's not like they'll throw tomatoes if they hate it. They don't even have digestive systems." "Comforting," Max muttered. He glanced at Zixnor's delegation again. The commander nodded once, a deliberate motion that Ellen had assured him was a Zorvian gesture of encouragement. Or maybe it was their version of a death threat. Hard to say. Max had been chosen for this task because he was, apparently, the most musically gifted person available and willing to spend an evening potentially offending an alien species. He had spent the last decade teaching music theory at a community college, but now he was Earth's ambassador for sound. No pressure. Ellen nudged him. "Just remember what we talked about. Music is a universal language. Even if they don't get it right away, they'll feel something." Max gave her a tight smile. "Let's hope it's not rage." He stepped forward and strummed a single chord. The sound hung in the air, rich and resonant. The Zorvians didn't move, but their bioluminescent patterns flickered briefly, a sequence Max couldn't interpret. Encouraged by the lack of immediate disapproval, he began to play a melody, a simple lilting tune designed to showcase the range of human harmony. The room was silent except for the music. Zixner leaned forward slightly, his elongated limbs folding neatly under him. A faint vibration filled the air, almost imperceptible but distinctly present. Ellen shot Max a quick glance, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. By the time Max transitioned into a more complex arrangement, something remarkable happened. Zixner's bioluminescent patches began to flash in rhythm with the music. Other members of the delegation joined in, their patterns syncing to Max's tempo. It was mesmerizing, like watching a living light show. When he finished, the room remained still for a moment before Zixner spoke. His voice was low and resonant, with a strange harmonic quality that made it feel like each word contained several layers of meaning. "Human Max Johnson," Zixner said, "your sound vibrations resonate with unexpected complexity. It is intriguing." Max blinked. Thanks." Zixner tilted his head. "This form of communication, music, as you call it, has potential. It is unlike anything in the Zorvian experience." Ellen stepped in, her tone diplomatic. "Commander, music is deeply tied to human emotions and culture. It's a way we connect, express ourselves, and even solve problems." Zixner's bioluminescence flickered in a pattern that Ellen had previously identified as curiosity. "Fascinating. Might this music be used to bridge divides?" Max exchanged a glance with Ellen, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. "Yeah," he said. "That's kind of the idea. It's like, well, it's hard to explain, but music has this way of making people, or, beings, feel things they can't always put into words." Zixner's gaze lingered on Max for a moment before he turned to his delegation. A brief exchange of vibrations followed, though Max couldn't make heads or tails of it. Finally, Zixner turned back to him. "We must study this further," the commander said. "Your music may hold unexpected applications." Ellen's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but Max caught it. "Applications?" she asked cautiously. Zixner's bioluminescence dimmed slightly. A gesture Ellen had explained was the Zorvian equivalent of deep thought. In diplomacy and beyond. Max wasn't sure what beyond meant, but he didn't like the sound of it. Still, the commander's interest seemed genuine, and he wasn't about to undermine Earth's first cultural presentation to an alien species. "Well," Max said, forcing a grin, "if you like that, wait until you hear jazz." Zixner's head tilted again. "Jazz?" Ellen sighed. "Oh boy." Max stared at the holographic waveform spinning lazily in the air above the lab table, trying to wrap his head around Lieutenant Kralek's explanation. The Zorvian scientist had spent the last 15 minutes detailing how his species perceived sound, not through auditory organs, but via specialized receptors embedded in their exoskeletons. It was, frankly, the weirdest biology lecture Max had ever sat through. "So let me get this straight," Max said, rubbing his temples. "You don't hear music. You feel it?" "Precisely," Kralek replied, his voice carrying the same harmonic quality as Zixnor's, but with a more excitable tone. "The vibrations from your guitar resonate across our dermal receptors. It is not dissimilar to how we experience environmental fluctuations on our homeworld." Max glanced at Ellen, who was leaning against the lab counter with her arms crossed. She looked simultaneously fascinated and like she was trying very hard not to laugh. "Well, that explains why they looked like a walking disco ball during your performance," she quipped. Kralek tilted his head, his bioluminescent patches pulsing faintly. "Disco ball? It's—" "Never mind," Ellen said with a wave of her hand. The lab was a stark contrast to the opulence of the conference room where Max had performed 2 days earlier. Stainless steel walls hummed faintly with the energy of alien machinery, and various holograms floated in the air, displaying everything from star charts to molecular structures. This was where the Zorvian delegation had chosen to analyze the unexpected applications of music, and Max had been reluctantly dragged along for the ride. Zixner stood at the far end of the room, observing the proceedings with his usual air of detached interest. When Kralek finished his explanation, the commander spoke. "Human Max Johnson," he began, his bioluminescence flickering in what Max had come to recognize as a thoughtful rhythm. "Your music's impact on our physiology is unprecedented. Lieutenant Kralek has theorized that prolonged exposure may have measurable effects on our neural activity." "Is that good?" Max asked hesitantly. Kralek's patches lit up in a rapid sequence that Ellen later explained was Zorvian excitement. "Potentially extraordinary. The frequencies you produce could serve as a form of therapeutic stimulus. Imagine calming tensions, enhancing focus, even bridging gaps in communication. It is elegant." Max exchanged a glance with Ellen. "So, what, I'm some kind of galactic therapist now?" "More like a cultural ambassador," Ellen said, though her grin suggested she enjoyed his discomfort. Zixner stepped closer, his towering frame casting a long shadow. "Human Max, your jazz, perform it." Max blinked. Here? Now?" Zixner nodded. "We wish to observe its effects." Max sighed, retrieving his guitar from its case. He hadn't even planned on playing today, but when intergalactic diplomats made demands, you didn't argue. He plucked a few strings, testing the tuning, before launching into a lively improvisation. The Zorvians froze, their bioluminescence flickering in erratic patterns. Kralek muttered something in his native language, his excitement evident even without translation. As Max played, he noticed something strange. The holographic displays in the lab began to flicker in time with the music. Instruments vibrated subtly on their mounts, and the air itself seemed to hum. Is that normal?" he asked, nodding toward the equipment. Kralek's patches glowed brightly. "Fascinating. Your music is generating harmonic resonance within the lab's systems. This suggests a level of acoustic manipulation previously unseen." "Is that bad?" Max asked, strumming a chord experimentally. "Not bad, unexpected," Kralek said, practically buzzing with enthusiasm. "Your music interacts with our technology in ways we do not fully understand. This warrants further study." Ellen raised an eyebrow. "You're saying Max's music could interfere with alien tech? That's concerning." Zixner's bioluminescence dimmed slightly, a gesture Max now recognized as serious contemplation. "A potential risk, yes, but also an opportunity. If harnessed correctly, this resonance could serve as a means of non-violent intervention in hostile scenarios." Max froze mid-strum. "Wait, are you suggesting weaponizing my music?" "Not weaponizing," Zixner corrected. "Utilizing. There is a distinction." "Yeah, I'm not sure I like where this is going," Max said, setting his guitar down. Ellen stepped forward, her expression cautious but firm. Commander, I think we need to be very careful about how we proceed. Music isn't just a tool or a weapon. It's a form of expression. If we start using it for tactical purposes, we risk losing what makes it special. Zixner regarded her for a long moment before nodding. Your perspective is noted, Dr. Martinez. We shall proceed with caution. Kralik, however, seemed less convinced. But the potential... Caution, Lieutenant, Zixner interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Max let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Okay, so, no weaponized jazz. Good talk. Ellen smirked. Let's get back to the original plan, using music to build bridges, not burn them. Zixner inclined his head. Agreed. We shall focus on the diplomatic applications of your... art. As the Zorvians resumed their analysis, Max leaned toward Ellen. You know, when I signed up for this, I thought the worst-case scenario was them not liking my music. I didn't think I'd have to worry about starting an intergalactic incident. Ellen patted his shoulder. Welcome to diplomacy, Max. It's always a little more complicated than it looks. He sighed. Next time, I'm bringing a tambourine. Let's see them weaponize that. Ellen's laugh echoed through the lab as the holograms flickered once more, in time with the distant hum of his guitar. Max slouched in his chair, idly plucking the strings of his guitar as Ellen paced in front of him, her hands gesturing animatedly. The Galactic Council meeting was just 24 hours away, and the two had been locked in the embassy's briefing room, trying to cobble together a coherent presentation that wouldn't accidentally spark interstellar war, or, worse, put everyone to sleep. We need something more compelling than just playing a few songs, Ellen said, running a hand through her hair. The Council already knows music has an effect on the Zorvians. What they don't know is how it could work for everyone else. Max leaned back and looked at her. You realize I'm a musician, right? Not a galactic strategist. If you want me to write a catchy tune about interspecies friendship, I'm your guy. But this is way above my pay grade. Ellen stopped pacing and gave him a pointed look. You're the one who accidentally turned a lab into a rave and made a bunch of aliens rethink their entire approach to sound. Like it or not, you're in this now. Max groaned, dropping his head back dramatically. Fine, but if I bomb tomorrow, I'm blaming you. Noted, she said dryly, before turning to the holographic display on the wall. It showed a rotating model of a Zorvian neural structure, with waves of color rippling through it. A visual representation of how their bodies processed vibrations. Okay, so let's focus on the data. Kralik's analysis shows that certain frequencies stimulate regions of their neural system associated with cooperation and empathy. If we can demonstrate that these effects aren't limited to Zorvians, we might have a shot at convincing the Council. Max raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do we prove that without a bunch of other species to test on? Ellen grinned. We already have one. She jabbed a thumb at him. You? Me? Max sat up. I'm not an alien. No, but humans are notoriously adaptable, she said. If we can show that music doesn't just affect emotional states, but can actively alter behavior, like fostering collaboration under stress, it might be enough to get them on board. Max frowned. You're not going to make me cry in front of the Council, are you? Ellen rolled her eyes. Relax. I've got something a little less humiliating in mind. She tapped a few buttons on the console, pulling up a new hologram. It showed a series of overlapping waveforms labeled with different emotional states. Calm, focused, energized. Tomorrow, we'll run a live demonstration. You'll play a short piece designed to evoke a specific response, and we'll monitor the Council members' reactions in real time. If it works, they'll feel the effects themselves. And if it doesn't? Then we hope the Zorvians' glowing reviews carry us through, Ellen said, only half joking. Max sighed, setting his guitar down. All right, let's do it. But if this blows up in our faces, I'm moving to a cabin in the woods and never touching a guitar again. The next day, the Galactic Council chamber was a whirlwind of activity. Representatives from dozens of species filled the massive circular room, their diverse forms creating a kaleidoscope of colors, textures, and sounds. Max stood at the center with his guitar, feeling very small and very out of place. Commander Zixner stood beside him, his bioluminescence steady and calm. Remember, Human Max Johnson, he said, the Council is not easily swayed. They will require more than words. Great pep talk, Max muttered, earning a smirk from Ellen, who was monitoring the equipment from a nearby console. As the room quieted, Zixner stepped forward to address the council. Esteemed representatives, we stand on the precipice of a new understanding. The humans have demonstrated that their music possesses unique properties that could transform how we approach diplomacy and conflict resolution. Today, we invite you to experience this phenomenon yourselves. He stepped back, nodding to Max, who swallowed hard and took a deep breath. Hi everyone, I'm Max. I'm just a guy with a guitar, so, bear with me. A few low murmurs rippled through the chamber, but Max ignored them, focusing on the strings beneath his fingers. He started with a slow, soothing melody. Something simple and deliberate. The notes hung in the air, and as they did, a subtle shift spread through the room. The tension in the chamber seemed to ease, and even the most rigid council members leaned forward slightly, their postures relaxing. Ellen's voice crackled in his earpiece. It's working. Keep going. Emboldened, Max transitioned into a more upbeat tune, one that built in complexity and rhythm. He glanced around and noticed small but remarkable changes. A species with iridescent scales began to shimmer more brightly. A group of insectoid beings tilted their heads in unison, and even the stoic Zorvians pulsed in time with the beat. By the time he finished, the room was silent, save for the faint hum of the holographic displays. Zixner stepped forward again, his voice measured but firm. You have now experienced what we have observed. Music is not merely an auditory phenomenon. It is a catalyst for connection, understanding, and unity. We propose its integration into galactic diplomacy as a non-violent means of fostering cooperation. The chamber erupted into a flurry of discussion, but Max couldn't tell if it was positive or negative. He leaned toward Ellen. Well, she grinned. Give them a minute. You just rewired their brains. They need time to process. After what felt like an eternity, the council's presiding member, a towering being with translucent skin, raised a hand for silence. This proposal is unconventional, yet the evidence is compelling. We shall proceed with a trial initiative. Let this be the beginning of a new era. The room erupted in applause, and Max let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Zixner turned to him, his bioluminescence glowing brighter than Max had ever seen. Human Max Johnson, you have done what many thought impossible. You have given us a new language. Max chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, just don't ask me to play the accordion. That's where I draw the line. Ellen laughed, and for the first time in days, Max felt like maybe, just maybe, he hadn't completely stumbled his way through this after all. As the applause in the Galactic Council hall began to subside, Max stood awkwardly at the center of the chamber, gripping his guitar like a life preserver. He wasn't sure what to do now. Was he supposed to bow, wave, thank them for not booing him off the galactic stage? Commander Zixner's bioluminescence pulsed in a steady rhythm as he stepped forward, his imposing form casting long shadows under the chamber's strange, ambient light. Human Max Johnson, he began, his tone carrying the kind of gravitas that made Max stand a little straighter. You have demonstrated that sound, when wielded with intention, can transcend barriers of biology and culture. This council has taken its first step toward a new paradigm, and you have played a pivotal role. Max gave a nervous laugh. Thanks. I guess that makes me the galaxy's weirdest diplomat. The council's presiding member, the translucent-skinned being who had announced the trial initiative moments earlier, regarded Max with an unreadable expression. Human Max Johnson, it said, its voice reverberating in overlapping tones. Your contributions are noted. However, it remains to be seen whether this music can truly serve as a universal tool. The trial period will require further demonstration. Oh, good, Max murmured under his breath, glancing at Ellen, who was stationed by the equipment console. She gave him a thumbs up, her expression saying, You've got this. He wasn't so sure. As the council members began filing out, their varying shapes and forms creating an almost hypnotic spectacle, Zixner approached Max. The council's decision is only the beginning, the commander said. Much depends on our ability to implement this initiative effectively. Your role, Human Max, is far from over. Max groaned. Of course it isn't. Can't I just retire now? I hear Mars has great views. Ellen joined them, her tablet tucked under one arm. Oh, quit whining. You just got the Galactic Council to greenlight one of the most ambitious cultural experiments in history. That's not something you walk away from. Max looked at her, deadpan. I didn't walk into this either. I was shoved. Kralek, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, chose this moment to chime in. Human Max, he said, his bioluminescence flickering in quick bursts. Your reluctance is noted, but your talent is undeniable. The data we have collected thus far is promising. Great, Max said, slinging his guitar over his shoulder. Glad to know I'm now officially a science experiment. Ellen smirked. Cheer up, Max. You're making history. Yeah, and history's exhausting, he shot back, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward. As the group exited the chamber, they were greeted by a small crowd of Zorvian delegates and human diplomatic staff, all buzzing with excitement over the council's decision. Zixner paused, turning to Max and Ellen. The trial initiative will require further collaboration. Lieutenant Kralek and I will work to refine the scientific framework, but the cultural implementation falls to you. Ellen nodded, already snapping into professional mode. Understood. We'll start by expanding the repertoire. Different genres, different emotional ranges. We'll also need to consider how other species perceive sound. Some might not respond to the same frequencies. Kralek's patches glowed brightly. Fascinating. I shall begin compiling comparative data on auditory and vibrational systems across species. Max raised a hand. Hate to interrupt, but when you say cultural implementation, what exactly does that mean? Am I going on some kind of intergalactic tour? Zixner regarded him with what Max could only interpret as amusement. In a manner of speaking, the Council will expect demonstrations across multiple member worlds. Your music must reach beyond the confines of this hall. Max stared at him. You're kidding. Commander Zixnor does not jest, Kralek said, his tone far too serious. Ellen clapped Max on the back. Looks like you're going galactic, rock star. Max groaned again, but this time it was more theatrical than genuine. A small part of him, one he'd never admit out loud, was starting to feel excited. Nervous, sure, but excited. He had no idea what the next few weeks, months, or even years would bring. But if there was one thing he'd learned, it was that music had a way of surprising you. As they walked back toward the embassy's shuttle bay, Max pulled his guitar off his shoulder and began strumming a light-hearted tune. Ellen raised an eyebrow. Practicing already? Nah, Max said with a grin. Just seeing if I can get Zixnor to dance. The commander's head tilted, his bioluminescence flickering in what Max had come to recognize as curiosity. Dance? Never mind, Max said quickly, though the thought of teaching an alien to do the cha-cha was oddly tempting. Ellen laughed, and even Kralek's glow seemed to pulse in amusement. For the first time in days, the weight of the Council's decision felt just a little lighter. As the shuttle doors closed behind them, Max leaned back in his seat, guitar resting on his lap. So, he said, looking at Ellen, what do you think the galaxy's going to make of bluegrass? Ellen snorted. Oh, this I've got to see. And as the shuttle lifted off, leaving the Galactic Council hall behind, Max couldn't help but smile. For better or worse, he was about to play the gig of a lifetime.